My name is Nora Caldwell. For as long as I can remember, my life has been a study in architecture, not the kind with blueprints and steel beams, but the invisible structures of family. I learned early on how to be a supporting beam for my older sister, Liana, how to serve as a load-bearing wall for my mother's anxieties, and how to be the quiet, unobtrusive foundation upon which the family's grander ambitions were built. I became an architectural designer, perhaps as a way to finally control the spaces around me, to build something with clean lines and clear boundaries, something that was entirely my own. After years of meticulous saving, of sketching my dreams onto napkins in late-night diners, I finally bought my own home. It wasn't a mansion, not by any stretch. It was a small, post-war bungalow in a quiet neighborhood of Maple Ridge, a town nestled in a valley that smelled of damp earth and pine. The house had what the realtor called good bones hardwood floors that groaned with stories, a stone fireplace, and a wide bay window in the front room that looked out onto an ancient oak tree. For me, it was more than a house, it was a sanctuary, the physical manifestation of a life I was building for myself, by myself. The slip of the paper grocery bag from my fingers was almost poetic in its slowness. I watched it descend, a graceful arc of brown paper and crushed vegetables, before it met the floor. The jar of artisanal pasta sauce, a small celebratory splurge, burst against the terracotta tiles I had spent a weekend laying myself. A splash of deep crimson bloomed across the floor, a vibrant, shocking stain on my new beginning. For 3 long, silent heartbeats, I stood frozen in my own doorway, the cool metal of my keys a heavy weight in my hand. My mother and my sister were inside my house. My house, whose address I had intentionally kept vague, sharing only a few proud photos on my phone 3 days ago. "What are you doing here?" The words felt foreign in my mouth, thin and hollow against the sudden, roaring silence. Liana spun around, a yellow measuring tape stretched taut between her hands. She had been measuring the spare bedroomy future home office, her expression shifting from surprise to an infuriatingly familiar look of entitlement. "Nora, you're home early." My mother, Marion, straightened up from where she'd been pushing my favorite reading chair into a corner I despised. "We thought you'd be at the firm until 6. We just wanted to get a head start." A head start on what? I stepped carefully over the spreading pool of tomato sauce, the soles of my shoes making a soft, sticky sound. "That doesn't answer my question." "How did you get in?" Mom waved a dismissive hand, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times, one that brushed away my concerns like so much dust. "Oh, don't be silly. I had a key made when I popped by to see the place. You left your purse on the counter when you showed me the garden." The memory surfaced, hazy at first, then sharp and clear. Her brief, congratulatory visit. Her asking to use the restroom. Her purse, left behind on the kitchen island. I had thought nothing of it. A simple oversight. Now, the casualness of the violation sent a chill through me. "You took my keys and made a copy? Without asking me?" A tremor started in my hands, a low hum of disbelief and anger. "Don't be so dramatic, darling," Mom said, turning her attention to fluffing a cushion on the sofa. "We're family. We're just figuring out how to make this lovely space work for everyone." "Make what work?" The question was a whisper, but I already knew the answer. The realization didn't sneak up on me, it crashed into me, a physical blow that stole the air from my lungs. Fragments of my life flickered through my mind like a badly spliced film. Liana's 16th birthday party, a catered affair with a live band in our backyard, while mine, 6 months later, was a quiet dinner with a cake from the grocery store. My mother's gentle explanation, "It's just not in the budget this year, honey." Liana's was a special occasion. The pattern had been set in stone since childhood. When I'd received a scholarship for college, the family celebrated my resourcefulness. When Liana got into the same university, they paid her full tuition, her rent, her car insurance, because she needed to focus on her studies without the stress of working. I was the practical one, she was the one to be provided for. This is my home, I said, each word carved from a place deep inside me that had been dormant for too long. Not yours. Not ours. Mine. I walked over to Liana and held out my hand. She was fidgeting with the spare key, its brassy shine an insult in the soft afternoon light. Her fingers tightened around it for a second, a flicker of defiance in her eyes, before she dropped it into my palm. You can't honestly be thinking of living here all by yourself, Liana said, her brow furrowed in that practiced expression of concern she used so effectively. It's a 3-bedroom house, Nora. The kids are practically sleeping on top of each other. Your living situation is not my problem to solve, I said. The steadiness of my own voice was a revelation. It felt solid, grounded. After everything we've done for you? Mom's hand flew to her chest, her eyes wide with theatrical shock. Your sister's children need a proper place to sleep. Family helps family, Nora. You've always understood that. The familiar weight of obligation settled onto my shoulders, heavy and suffocating. A lifetime of being told my purpose was to support, to accommodate, to sacrifice for Liana. But standing there, in the middle of my violated sanctuary, surrounded by the scent of shattered tomatoes and betrayal, something inside me finally broke free. The trembling in my hands ceased, replaced by a cold, clear certainty. You have 1 minute to leave my house, I said, pointing toward the front door, my arm as steady as a steel beam. After that, I'm calling the police. You wouldn't, Mom hissed, her voice sharp with disbelief. 50 seconds, I said, my eyes locked on hers. They left. Mom slammed the door with enough force to rattle the antique glass in the window panes. I slid the deadbolt home, the solid thunk the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. The phone rang 20 minutes later. I was on my hands and knees, scrubbing at the stubborn red stain on the grout, the sharp smell of vinegar filling the air. My father's name glowed on the screen. What in God's name do you think you're doing? His voice, a familiar boom of paternal disappointment, filled my ear the moment I answered. Your mother is beside herself. You are tearing this family apart with this selfish little display. I said nothing, just scrubbed harder at a spot that wouldn't lift. Liana needs you, Nora. That's what family does. We support each other. You've always known that. Always known. Always accommodated. Always yielded. Not anymore, I whispered, so quietly I wasn't sure if he heard it. He was still talking, his voice a torrent of accusations and ultimatums. I pressed the end call button and let the silence wash over me. My gaze fell on the small, framed photo I had placed on the mantelpiece above the fireplace. It was from last Christmas. Mom, Dad, Liana with her husband, Mark, and their 2 children, all beaming. And me, standing slightly to the side, wearing the strained, polite smile that had become my uniform. For the first time, I didn't see a family portrait. I saw an ecosystem, one that had been sustained for decades by my silent sacrifice. With deliberate care, I picked up the frame and placed it face down on the polished wood of the mantel. This house was mine. This life was mine. And I was done giving pieces of it away. A few days later, a fragile peace had begun to settle over the bungalow. I was sipping my morning tea, watching dust motes dance in the sunbeams slanting through the bay window, when my phone chimed with a notification. Liana had tagged me in an Instagram story. I tapped the icon, my stomach tightening in anticipation. It wasn't a new post. It was a highlight from 3 weeks ago, before I had even closed on the house. A picture of her 2 children, Lily and Noah, sharing a bunk bed in their cramped room. The caption read, "So excited the kids will finally have rooms of their own soon. My amazing sister is making it happen." Family first blessed. My fingers trembled as I navigated to the comments. A friend of hers had asked, "Which room is Lily getting?" Liana's reply was there in crisp, digital text, "The one with the big bay window, of course. Noah will get the one across the hall. Mom says the 3rd bedroom should stay a guest room for when Nana visits." My tea mug slipped from my grasp, its contents spilling across the polished floorboards I had so lovingly restored. I barely felt the warmth seeping into my socks. 3 weeks ago. They had been assigning rooms in my house 3 weeks ago, before the ink on my mortgage documents was even dry. A wave of nausea washed over me, and I ran to the bathroom, my stomach heaving. This wasn't a spontaneous, misguided attempt to help. This was a premeditated takeover. They had surveyed my dream, my sanctuary, and drafted their own blueprints for it before I even held the keys. As I splashed cold water on my face, my phone buzzed again. A text message. It was from my dad, but his fumble-fingered texting had accidentally included me in a group chat with Mom and Liana. "Don't worry about Nora's little outburst," my mother had written. "She just needs to feel like she's in control for a minute. She'll give in once you're moved in. She always does. She always does." 4 words that defined my entire existence within my family. The shaking started again, a deep, cellular tremor that rattled me to my core. I leaned against the cool bathroom wall, the tile a stark contrast to the fire raging inside me. They hadn't just misjudged me, they had fundamentally misunderstood who I was becoming. The invitation to dinner came via text the following evening. "We need to find a way forward," Dad wrote. "Your mother is making your favorite pot roast. Sunday at 7. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to decline, to block their numbers, to barricade myself inside my fortress of solitude. But a small, withered part of me, the part that still yearned for the family I wished I had, wondered if there was a chance. A sliver of hope that they had seen the hurt they had caused and were ready to apologize. When I arrived, the dining room table was set with my mother's wedding china, reserved for holidays and momentous occasions. My father, mother, and Liana were seated together on one side, a single empty chair placed opposite them, as if for an interrogation. The battle lines were clearly drawn. "Nora," Mom began, her smile stretched thin across her face. "We're so glad you came. We know things have been tense." Before I could form a reply, my father slid a thick manila folder across the polished mahogany table. "We've been doing some thinking," he said, his voice imbued with a sense of magnanimous authority. "And we've found the perfect solution." Inside the folder were glossy printouts for 5-bedroom houses, all in an affluent suburb near Liana's children's private school. Each listing was covered in my mother's neat handwriting. "Great backyard for the kids," on one. "Perfect for a playroom," on another. "These are very nice," I said slowly, trying to process what I was seeing. "For Liana and Mark." Dad cleared his throat. "For all of us, Nora. Together." "We've already spoken to a mortgage broker," Mom added, stirring her iced tea as if discussing the weather. "It seems moving your equity from the bungalow to a new property is a fairly straightforward process. The price difference would be quite manageable if we all pool our resources." My mouth went dry. You contacted a mortgage broker about my finances?" "Just a preliminary inquiry, dear," Mom said, waving her hand again in that infuriatingly dismissive way. "To see what was possible." "And of course, not all of your furniture will fit," Liana chimed in, a thoughtful look on her face. "But we can sell the pieces that don't work. We'll need the space in the living room for the kids' playpen." The front door opened and Mark, Liana's husband, strolled in, carrying a briefcase. He gave me a brief nod before turning to my father. "Hey, Robert. I was just thinking about the garage spaces. I'll need the left bay for my workshop. Nora won't mind parking on the street, will she?" The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it all left me breathless. They were carving up a life I had painstakingly built, divvying up assets they had not contributed a single cent towards, all with the casual entitlement of feudal lords. My hands curled into tight fists in my lap. "Nora," Dad said, his voice dropping into the low, serious tone he used when I was a child who had deeply disappointed him. Refusing to cooperate here would send a very clear message. It would show that you don't truly care about being part of this family. Mom reached a hand across the table, her manicured nails stopping just short of touching my skin. Think of your niece and nephew. Children remember who was there for them, who made sacrifices for them. Everyone in Maple Ridge knows family comes first, Liana added, her eyes narrowing. What would people think, Nora? If they knew you were sitting on all that space while your sister's family was struggling? The weight of their collective expectation felt like a physical pressure on my chest. For my entire life, my identity had been Liana's supportive sister, never simply Nora, a woman with her own needs, her own dreams. I spoke with your boss, Mr. Sterling, this morning, Dad mentioned, as casually as if he were discussing a golf game. Just to give him a heads up. He was very understanding that you might need some flexibility in your schedule over the next few weeks to help Liana with the move. After all we've done for you, Mom's voice trembled with perfectly calibrated emotion. Giving you a home for all those years. The memory flashed, unbidden, writing rent checks to my own parents every month while I lived in their basement and put myself through college, while they happily paid for Liana's chic off-campus apartment without a second thought. The silence in the room stretched, thick with anticipation. They were all waiting for the final act of a play they'd performed dozens of times. Nora protests. The family applies pressure. Nora surrenders. She always does. But something profound had shifted in me since I'd found them in my house. The patterns were no longer invisible, they were stark and undeniable, like the steel framework of a building exposed. I stood up, my movements slow and deliberate. I placed my cloth napkin neatly beside my untouched plate of pot roast. This conversation, I said, my voice clearer and stronger than I could have ever imagined, is over. I turned and walked out of the dining room, leaving their shocked faces and their carefully constructed plans behind. In my car, as I pulled away from the curb, my phone began to light up with a furious barrage of calls and texts. I switched it to silent. The question wasn't whether I was losing my family. The real question was whether I had ever truly had one in the first place. Some boundaries, I was learning, couldn't be fences. They had to be walls. The days that followed the dinner ambush were a masterclass in psychological warfare. My phone became a conduit for guilt, a constant stream of notifications pinging like tiny, painful detonations. I made the mistake of looking at Liana's latest Instagram post. It was a picture of Lily and Noah, their faces artfully arranged into sad pouts, huddled on a small sofa bed. The caption read, "So hard when your kids don't have the space they need to thrive. Praying for a solution. Family over everything except when it's not inconvenient." The comments section was a sea of sympathy. People I'd known my whole life, women from my mother's book club, parents of my old school friends, all offering prayers and support for Liana's plight. My third-grade teacher, Mrs. Peterson, even sent me a text, "Your mother showed me the pictures of your lovely new home, Nora. It's wonderful that you have so much room for just one person." The implied judgment was a sharp, familiar sting. I gripped the edge of my granite countertop until my knuckles were white. The betrayal wasn't just from Liana, it was from my mother, who was orchestrating this public shaming campaign, painting me as a selfish, ungrateful daughter who had forgotten where she came from. The doorbell rang, and my heart leaped into my throat. Through the peephole, I saw our family pastor, Pastor Evans, standing on my porch, his Bible held firmly under his arm. This wasn't a social call. This was an intervention. "I'm sorry, I'm not really receiving visitors today," I called through the closed door. "Nora, it's Pastor Evans. I've known you since you were a little girl. Your family is worried sick about you." I didn't ask for a spiritual consultation, I said, my own firmness surprising me. "Please respect my privacy." I heard him sigh, a sound heavy with disappointment. "I will pray your heart softens, my child." After he left, I sank into a kitchen chair, the full scale of their retaliation becoming terrifyingly clear. They weren't just angry, they were mobilizing, using every social and emotional weapon in their arsenal. The next day, I discovered how far they were willing to go. When my mortgage statement didn't arrive, I called the bank. "Oh, yes, Ms. Caldwell," the cheerful representative said. "We've been sending your statements to the updated forwarding address you provided. Your parents contacted us to have all your financial documents sent to their home for safekeeping." The violation left me breathless. They were attempting to seize control of my life piece by piece, intercepting my mail, inserting themselves into my finances. The what-ifs were horrifying. What if I hadn't been so vigilant? What other parts of my identity were they trying to quietly commandeer? Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. I lay awake at night, my mind racing, cataloging every possible vulnerability. The bungalow, my sanctuary, began to feel like a besieged fortress. This morning, I'd received a formal letter from my homeowners association. My parents had lodged a complaint, alleging I was running a commercial business out of my home, a complete fabrication that now required me to submit official documentation to disprove. The cost of this fight was mounting, emotionally and mentally. But the alternative, a lifetime of being a resource to be exploited, of seeing my own dreams as secondary to Liana's desires, was no longer an option. I started to fight back, not with anger, but with meticulous, deliberate action. I changed every password I had. I rented a post office box and had all my mail forwarded there. I installed a comprehensive security system with cameras at every entrance. I began a detailed log of every unwanted phone call, every manipulative text, every slanderous social media post. The methodical process calmed the shaking in my hands. It felt like I was finally drawing my own blueprints. When the security technician left, I felt a profound sadness. My beautiful home, my symbol of freedom, was now wired and monitored. But there was relief, too. A sense of reclaiming control. The next morning, a small miracle was waiting on my desk at work. It was a loaf of still warm sourdough bread, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. A small note was tucked beneath it. I heard what happened. My sister tried to pull something similar years ago. Not everyone thinks you're wrong. Some of us wish we'd had your courage. It was signed by Sophia, a woman from the accounting department whom I barely knew. I hadn't realized how utterly alone I'd felt until that small act of solidarity brought tears to my eyes. The moment of peace was fleeting. That evening, as I pulled into my driveway, Liana's SUV was parked at the curb. Through the living room window, I could see the distinct silhouettes of my family moving inside my house. The familiar, sickening wave of violation washed over me, but this time it was followed by something new, a cold, crystalline anger. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't hesitate. I picked up my phone and dialed 911. I watched from my car as a police cruiser pulled up. Neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains. My family, realizing I was home, spilled out onto the front porch, their faces a mixture of fury and indignation. "She's throwing her own family out on the street," Liana cried dramatically to the approaching officer. "We were just visiting." "With what key?" I asked, my voice calm as I got out of my car. I held up my phone, showing the officer the notification from my new security camera. "Unauthorized entry detected. I have changed the locks. I did not give you permission to be in my home." Mom stepped forward, her eyes darting toward the watching neighbors. "How could you do this, Nora? Calling the police on your own mother? What will people think?" And in that moment, something inside me clicked into place. That question, the invisible cage that had confined me for my entire life, suddenly seemed utterly absurd. "I don't care what they think," I said, my voice ringing with a clarity that felt like coming home to myself. "I care what I think. And I think this ends now." The officer, after a brief conversation, escorted them from my property with a stern warning about trespassing. As their car sped away, I understood something profound. I had spent my life terrified of disappointing them, measuring my worth by their approval. But I had never stopped to consider how deeply and consistently they had disappointed me. The next day, I met with Ethan, an old friend from college who was now a family law attorney. "They're counting on your guilt, Nora," he said, his expression grim as he listened to my story. "They've been using it as a weapon against you your whole life." Together, we drafted a formal cease and desist letter. A week later, when Liana showed up at my office, her eyes red from what I knew was theatrical crying, my colleagues formed an unspoken shield around me. Sophia intercepted her at the reception desk while two others insisted I join them for an early lunch, effectively blocking Liana's attempt to ambush me in the lobby. The contrast was stunning. These people, who owed me nothing, respected my boundaries without question. My family, who claimed to love me, saw every boundary as a challenge to be overcome. With each passing day, I felt my voice growing stronger. "No" became a complete sentence. "This doesn't work for me" rolled off my tongue without an apology attached. The words, "I've made my decision," no longer felt like a betrayal, but a declaration of independence. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with an alert from my doorbell camera. It was a live feed of my mother on my front porch. She was trying a key in the new lock. When it didn't work, her face contorted in frustration. She reached into her purse and pulled out another key, then another. My heart pounded as I watched. This wasn't over. But for the first time, I felt ready for the fight. My dining room table, once a place for quiet meals, had become my command center. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, I spread out the puzzle pieces of my life, arranging them into a coherent, undeniable picture. The spreadsheet detailing every trespass. The call recording from the bank. The folder of screenshots from social media. The security footage of my mother trying 3 different keys in my front door played on a loop on my laptop. "This is airtight," Ethan said, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed the documentation. My lawyer friend had sacrificed his Sunday to help me, the scent of strong coffee and legal precedent filling my living room. "The cease and desist letter is ready. Are you sure you want to deliver it yourself?" "I have to," I said. This was a foundation I had to lay myself. The next morning, I stood on my parents' doorstep and placed the certified letter into my mother's hand. She didn't open it. She just stared at me, her eyes filled with a profound, wounded confusion, as if my self-preservation was the ultimate act of betrayal. "You will regret this, Nora," she whispered. But she took the envelope. 3 days passed in an almost unnerving silence. I slept through the night, a deep, dreamless sleep that felt more restorative than anything I'd experienced in months. The escalation came on Thursday. I was deep in concentration at my desk when Sophia appeared at my cubicle, her face pale. "Nora," she whispered urgently. "Your parents are in the lobby. They told the receptionist your sister was in a car accident and that you need to come with them immediately." A cold dread seized me, until my phone buzzed with a new Instagram story from Liana. It was a picture of her latte, captioned "Midday Slump." It was time-stamped 2 minutes ago. I found my parents in a heated discussion with the receptionist. Mom was dabbing at perfectly dry eyes with a tissue while Dad demanded, in his most authoritative voice, that I be brought out. "It's a family emergency," he boomed. "Her sister has been hurt." I stepped forward, my footsteps silent on the polished concrete floor. "I was just texting with Liana," I said, my voice carrying across the hushed lobby. "She's fine." My mother's hand froze mid-dab. "Nora. Thank goodness. We were trying to reach you." My boss, Mr. Sterling, appeared at my side, his expression a perfect mask of professional neutrality. "Miss Caldwell? Is everything all right here?" My father flashed his most charming, disarming smile. "Just a family misunderstanding, Bill. We'll just borrow Nora for a moment." "My family," I said, looking directly at my boss but speaking loudly enough for everyone in the reception area to hear, "appears to be lying about a medical emergency in an attempt to remove me from my workplace." I sincerely apologize for the disturbance. Security escorted them out. I walked back to my desk, my head held high, ignoring the curious and sympathetic stares of my colleagues. That evening, I discovered Liana's latest salvo, a GoFundMe page titled "Help a Young Family Find a Home." It featured a lovely, smiling photo of me, used without my permission. The narrative painted a heartbreaking tale of a family in crisis, subtly implying their plight was my fault. One carefully worded email to the platform's legal department, citing copyright infringement and misrepresentation, and the campaign vanished by morning. The voicemail from my father that night was a masterpiece of unintentional confession. His initial rage gave way to pure, unfiltered truth. "You ungrateful child, do you have any idea what you've done? We had it all worked out. We were going to move in there whether you liked it or not, and now you've gone and embarrassed your mother in front of the entire church." I saved the recording with a grim sense of validation. A week later, an internal email circulated at work. The company was expanding, opening a new branch in Phoenix, Arizona. They were looking for a senior designer to lead the new team. I stared at the announcement, a strange fluttering of possibility in my chest. Was moving a form of surrender, a way of letting them win? Or was it the ultimate Victoria chance to build a new life, a new sanctuary, entirely beyond their reach? The question hung in the air, but the answer was becoming clearer. My support system, the one I had built myself, was proving stronger than the one I was born into. Ethan sent a second, more strongly worded letter to my parents, outlining the legal consequences of continued harassment. My therapist, Dr. Reed, helped me practice responses that were firm, factual, and devoid of the emotional bait they kept casting. At work, Mr. Sterling quietly arranged for my calls to be screened. The tide was turning, even within the family. My aunt called, her voice hesitant, asking to hear my side of the story. A cousin messaged me on Facebook, saying he didn't think what they were asking was right. Their carefully curated image was cracking, revealing the raw selfishness beneath. The official job offer arrived in my email on a Friday afternoon. The words "branch lead designer, Phoenix" glowed on my screen like a beacon. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, a genuine, unforced smile spread across my face. A week later, the cherry pie sat on my kitchen counter, its latticed crust a perfect golden brown. It was a Trojan horse. My mother stood beside it, her fingers tapping a restless rhythm against the granite, a beat I knew as intimately as my own heartbeat. It was the rhythm of her impatience when her plans were not immediately embraced. "It's your favorite," she said. Cherry had always been Liana's favorite. Mine was apple. I had told her this at least once a year for the past 30 years. Her eyes kept flicking to the small, discreet security camera I'd mounted near the ceiling. The tiny, blinking red light seemed to unnerve her, which gave me a quiet sense of satisfaction. "I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot with all of this," she began, her voice smoothed into an unnatural pleasantness. This speech was rehearsed. "Your father and I have been talking, and we've come up with a compromise that should make everyone happy." "I wasn't aware we were in a negotiation," I said, keeping the kitchen island between us. It felt like a necessary barrier. She pulled a familiar-looking folder from her oversized handbag. "We found some absolutely perfect properties just 15 minutes from here. 5 bedrooms, beautiful yards." She slid several glossy real estate listings toward me. "The idea is simple. You sell this little place. We all move into one of these together. There's even a lovely in-law suite for Liana's family." I glanced at the listings. The price tags were nearly triple what my bungalow had cost. "And how, exactly, would this be financed?" "Well, you would get the master suite, of course," she offered, as if it were a grand concession. "We've already toured 3 of them." The realtor was so helpful once we explained the family situation. "You toured houses? In my name?" The calm in my voice was a solid thing, an anchor in the storm of her audacity. She waved her hand dismissively. We had to move fast, darling. These things get snapped up. She leaned forward, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper. Listen, Nora. If you're going to be difficult, we can always explore other avenues. Contesting the ownership of this place, for instance. You couldn't possibly have afforded this down payment without family help. Family help? The words tasted like ash in my mouth. You mean the full market rent I paid you every month while I lived in your basement? Or the student loans I'm still paying off from the degree I funded myself, while Liana's was paid in full? My mother's face hardened, the pleasant mask falling away. Don't you dare be ungrateful. I didn't respond. I simply walked into my office and returned with a crisp, white envelope. I placed it on the counter between us, right next to her untouched pie. What's this? It's a job offer, I said, pushing it toward her. From my company's new branch in Arizona. I accepted it last week. Her hand froze mid-tap. Arizona? I'm selling the bungalow, I said, watching her expression flicker with a brief, triumphant light before I delivered the final blow. And I'm moving to Phoenix next month. The color drained from her face. But what about Liana? What about the family? Liana's housing situation, I said, my voice even, is not my concern. I opened a drawer and pulled out the thick manila folder that had become my shield. I spread its contents across the counter like a winning hand in a game I never wanted to play. Financial statements detailing my rent payments. University tuition receipts, mine and Liana's. A spreadsheet comparing birthday and holiday expenditures for the last decade. What is all this? Mom's voice was a thin, reedy whisper. It's evidence, I said. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen, bringing up the security footage. And this is a video log of 17 unauthorized attempts to enter my property. She stared at the screen, watching a sped-up version of herself and Liana jiggling my doorknob, peering through windows, even once speaking to a locksmith who, thankfully, had the integrity to refuse the job without the owner present. I'm not running away from anything, I said, gathering the papers back into their folder. I'm running towards something. A life where my worth isn't measured by my usefulness to others. Your father will be furious, she whispered, but the threat was hollow. There was a new, frightening uncertainty in her eyes. I'm counting on it, I said. 3 days later, I walked into my parents' house for what they had ominously billed as the final family meeting. The driveway was crowded with the cars of my aunt, my uncle, and my grandmother. The jury had been assembled to witness my public surrender. I took a deep breath, the folder tucked under my arm like a shield, and walked inside. The conversation in the living room ceased as I entered. Liana sat on the sofa, nestled between our parents. The extended family formed a loose, expectant semicircle around them. There she is, my father said, standing with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We were just about to explain our wonderful solution to everyone. Actually, I said, my voice carrying clearly in the suddenly silent room. I have an announcement of my own. I placed my folder on the coffee table, opened it, and laid the official real estate listing for my bungalow on top. The words "for sale" were emblazoned across the photo of my perfect little house. The bungalow goes on the market Monday, I announced. I've accepted a promotion, and I'm moving to Arizona at the end of next month. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, before Liana's shriek shattered it. But what about us? Where are we supposed to live? I met her gaze, my own calm and steady. The same place you live now. The same place you would have been perfectly happy to stay in, if you hadn't decided you were entitled to what was mine. My father rose to his feet, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. This is what you do. You abandon your family after everything we have done for you? Everything you've done? I reached into my folder and began passing out copies of my documentation to my grandmother, my aunt, my uncle. Let's talk about what you've actually done. Here's a record of the financial disparities, the different rules, the different expectations. My aunt's eyes widened as she scanned the papers. You made Nora pay rent all through college while you paid for Liana's entire apartment? It built character, my father snapped, but his bluster was fading as he saw the expressions on the faces of his own siblings. You should see the security footage, I added, my voice resonating with newfound confidence. Of them trying to break into my house. Or read the complaint they filed with my HOA. Or listen to the recording of them trying to get my bank to transfer my mortgage. My grandmother, a woman whose opinion my mother revered above all others, looked at my parents, her hand covering her mouth. Marion? Robert? Is this true? Their silence was the only answer she needed. Driving home that night, my phone buzzed, not with angry texts from my parents, but with tentative messages of support from my aunt and cousins. The family mythology was beginning to crumble. 2 days later, my realtor called. You're not going to believe this, she said, her voice giddy with excitement. We have a cash offer, $20,000 over asking, with a 30-day close. I'll take it, I said, without a moment's hesitation. One last thing, she added. There are a few spare keys the previous owner left. Do you want me to hold on to them, or should I just discard them? I thought of all the keys copied without my consent, all the locks that had been violated. Discard them, I said firmly. I won't be needing them where I'm going. A year later, the Arizona sun streamed through the large, curtainless windows of my new home. I hadn't decided on a style yet, and the freedom of not having to decide felt like a luxury. The furniture was arranged exactly as I wanted it, my art hung on walls I had painted a warm, earthy terracotta. Beside my drafting table, a collection of photographs bloomed of me, smiling, on a red rock hiking trail, me, shaking hands with the company CEO, me, standing proudly on the porch of this very house on the day I got the keys. There were no family photos. Outside, my small garden was thriving. Rows of basil, mint, and rosemary herbs my mother had always called too aggressive for a proper garden grew in wild profusion. I bit into a sun-warmed strawberry from my own patch, its sweetness a small, perfect joy. The doorbell rang. My friends, my chosen family, filed in, their arms laden with gifts and food. Happy birthday, Nora, my colleague, Grace, called out, setting down a bakery box. Apple pie, as requested. For decades, my birthdays had been celebrated with chocolate cake, Liana's favorite. It's just silly to make 2 desserts when we can all share, Mom would say. To building homes, not just houses, I said, raising my glass of wine. And to the family we choose. The words settled in my chest, warm and true. Near the door, a simple wooden hook held a single, solitary key. Mine. Later, after everyone had gone home, I scrolled through the photos on my phone, pausing on an old one from a family holiday. Everyone was clustered together, smiling for the camera. I was on the edge of the frame, half cut off. After a moment's thought, I pressed delete. I replaced it with a picture of my new front door, which I had painted a brilliant, unapologetic shade of turquoise. My cousin Carla sends a text every now and then. My uncle called last month, just to check in. These are tentative connections, rebuilt slowly on a new foundation of respect and clearly defined boundaries. As I settled into bed in my quiet, peaceful house, I wondered if complete separation had been the only path to healing, or if someday, from this safe distance, a new, healthier kind of relationship could be built from the ashes of the old. For tonight, though, it was enough to be here, in this life that was wholly and completely mine, a structure I had designed and built myself, from the foundation up.